with Mary Veau and Laura Levenson of Weichert Workforce Mobility. It was recorded on the 7th of April, so it is possible that things have changed between the recording and you watching it. Hello and welcome back to our series of interviews with Euros members and colleagues across the world. I am delighted to introduce you to Laura Levenson and Mary Veau. I'm sure most of you watching this will know exactly who they are, but I will introduce them formally. Mary is the Director of Global Supply Chains for Weichert Workforce Mobility, and Laura is the Global Practice Leader for Consulting and Advisory Services. And I'm really, really thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much for taking time and being part of this. My first question, which I ask everybody, is how are things where you are? Laura, do you want to start?
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon. I am located in the state of New York, and I'm in the county of Westchester, which was one of the first places to be affected by the virus. In fact, the town of New Rochelle, which is about 3 miles away, was the first, and they were the first to practice shelter in place. Oh boy, that was probably in February or maybe very beginning of March. For the most part, people are behaving themselves and trying to stay in as much as possible. I do see kids and adults taking walks and playing outside, but pretty much keeping a distance. And very few cars on the road. Very, very few cars.
I mean, it is extraordinary. I was talking with Susan Ginsberg last week, and she's also in Westchester. And,
yeah.
You know, obviously, you've been living with this for a long time. I mean, this is, you know, your shelter in place has been in place for a long time. But you can go out. The grocery stores are open, but no other businesses, right?
Correct. The grocery stores are interesting. Everyone's got sort of their own rules. I've been preferring to shop in the smaller stores where they're pretty strict. They will only let a certain number of people in the store at a time. So they've set up a queuing system where you wait, and as one person comes out, one person goes in. So sometimes you could be waiting 10, 15 minutes before you get in. And they're handing out gloves if you want them, not so much masks, but you see now in the last couple of days, more people putting on masks, putting on gloves. I've tried to limit my shopping as much as possible. However, about 3 weeks ago, my uncle and his entire family came down with the virus. So I was the only one actually who could go shopping for them. So I went a few times, and fortunately for me, I just was extra cautious. And before even they suggested doing all that, I know people thought I was crazy, but I figured it can't to contain as much as you can, knowing full well that the mask doesn't actually really prevent the virus, but it prevents you from touching
your face. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And how is your family members now? Are they okay?
Everybody's doing well, thank you.
Great. I'm really pleased to hear it. Mary, how are you and where are you? Great to see you.
I'm actually out of our Boston office, which actually isn't right in the city. It's about 20 miles south of Boston. Doing well. Our state had almost now 14,000 cases and 260 deaths, which actually represents the 5th largest numbers in the U.S. Obviously, New York being the highest. Our governor had announced a state of emergency weeks ago and issued a stay-at-home advisory. So like Laura, I think most of us are trying to behave as much as possible, but we are allowed to go out for walks, you know, or if people have pets, walking their pets. But only essential services obviously are open, including grocery stores and pharmacies, just like pretty much everywhere else. But really encouraging practicing that social distancing, using masks and gloves. Restaurants are obviously closed. I think for some, they're trying to encourage, because they do have, a lot of them have takeout. So they're trying to encourage people as much as possible to support those businesses by at least getting takeout. Same as Laura, you know, I try to limit the amount of times I go to the grocery store. I usually try to once a week and as early as possible, where it's not as crowded, and using my gloves. I haven't used the mask either, but trying to take the wipes and wiping off the carriage and trying to practice as best I can. It's an eerie feeling being in the supermarket. Everybody's kind of walking around like zombies, trying to stay away from each other. So a very different world.
It is a very different world. It's extraordinary. I mean, I have my mother-in-law staying with us. So we're being very careful. She's in her late 80s. And so we've been taking advantage of the click and collect service that our supermarkets have. So you literally drive up, they put the stuff in the back, and you drive off. And it's just so surreal. I mean, you know, who ever thought that, you know, going to the supermarket would be something you would think about? I mean, genuinely think about. How was, given that, I mean, you've been going through this a long time, both in Boston and New York, how was your contingency planning and what was the implementation of that like?
Yeah, it's been done really well. I mean, Weichert's senior leadership team had meetings at the onset of what was going on with the virus to make decisions and planning for the colleagues within Weichert. They did test our continuity plans by asking everyone to work from home on a Friday, which was about a month ago, to see how everything worked out from a technology perspective. So based on the success of this, they did mandate a work from home policy for all colleagues until further notice. As it pertains to the global supply chain, we did send out a communication several weeks ago and informing them of the steps that we've been taking for the safety and health of our colleagues, but also our supply chain as well, and providing them with some guidance on best practices for adapting their services to accommodate the assignee, and you know, the regular things about making sure that they're following the CDC guidelines and the World Health Organization, doing the typical things that everybody's doing, washing hands several times and using masks and gloves when out and about and practicing social distancing, and notifying us is really important immediately if someone or is suspected of having the virus. You know, there's been a common theme through the supply chain. As you know, you've interviewed so many of them. I've enjoyed watching Rob and Marie and Maria Christina and all of them who actually are supply chain partners, Anna. But they're all kind of transitioned over to the virtual orientation and property tours, communicating with the assignees via Skype or email, WhatsApp, any kind of online portals, and utilizing apps to provide city and country information. Obviously, you know, however, since that communication went out a few weeks ago, we all know that the circumstances have drastically changed and the severity of the virus has spread and increased exponentially. So there's been a lot more challenges. Government agencies closing. Social Security office in the U.S. actually had closed and was only really doing any kind of emergency services. Country board is closing, people not being able to go in and out. So even since those measures that we asked them and the guidance, things have really changed. So not a lot of movement around, I think, right now. Even in China, and although those cases have decreased, they're taking measures to avoid a second surge or resurgence there. So they actually last week are restricting any non-residents to enter the country. As it pertains to the cross-cultural and language training, they really, you know, transitioned all over to virtual training and the utilization of apps. And interesting, Dominic, I actually started taking a virtual Spanish class at the end of January before all this started in preparation for going to the Seville conference. So I was quite disappointed that I'm not going to get to practice my language skills this year. But at any rate, it's been a great experience. It was a way to do virtual training, and it's really been a lot of advantages to it. Number one, I can wear yoga pants and slippers as I do my classes. I don't have to drive to a language center, and probably best of all, I don't have to clean my house for such language training coming into the home. So it's been a really good experience, and I highly encourage the virtual language training.
That's a really good idea. I'm going to do the same. I did learn Spanish when I was a child. We lived in Belize. But yeah. Every time I go back to Spain, it comes back a little bit, but not properly. I can get by with ordering beer. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I know the transition to virtual has been phenomenal, and I've got to say a big shout out to everyone who's ever worked in IT who we may have taken for granted until now, because we need them. How are your teams coping with the whole notion of being at home and shelter in place?
Do you want me to?
Okay, go ahead, Laura.
Oh, sorry. Well, it's interesting because there's so many different types of teams, right, at Weichert.
Yeah.
I just want to add that for me, work from home was nothing new. I've been working from home for almost my entire time at Weichert, which is over 7 years. But it's still different, of course, when you're forced to work from home. I mean, I had the choice. I'm lucky that I live close enough to our New Jersey office that if I had meetings with New Jersey folks, I would go in. And so obviously that's a big change. For our client services teams, what I have been hearing is, quite a bit of stress around helping our clients make sure that we know where everyone is and where they are in the process of their moves, whether it be an international or a domestic move, because obviously both are affected. The teams have reported to me, it's sort of a beautiful thing, right? There's a bit of a silver lining. They're really seeing how valuable and important and essential their roles are in terms of supporting not only the clients, but also the customers and providing guidance. For many of them, the mobility counselor is a familiar voice and someone who can really help them with resources. And many of our counselors are dealing with things that they never thought they'd be dealing with before. And so that's pretty interesting. As far as my group, my team, which is the consulting and advisory group, we are faced with the pressure of helping our clients stay abreast of what's happening. And I mean, we're all in the same boat. Every day there's a new regulation will have an effect on the policy and what recommendations we may be able to make. One thing, of course, you could imagine that's coming up a lot is acceptance and the nature of the acceptance. And what are we going to do about creating a physical presence somewhere? What are we going to do about our immigration status if we're stuck somewhere? What about temporary living? We can't get out of temporary living because we can't move into our permanent living. So lots and lots of questions. We're very busy with the current state, whereas we may not be quite as busy with new initiations coming in. So we're still busy. It's just a different kind of busy.
It's a different kind of busy. It is very interesting how different countries have dealt with all of this stuff. I mean, I was talking, as you referred to, Marie and Aideen in Dubai, and the Dubai government just said, okay, your immigration status, it's all on hold. We're extending everything, it's across the board, because obviously if you are not working, you're not supposed to stay in the country, so they've just said no. Whereas I was talking with Stuart McAllister in Hungary, and he was like, no, there's a whole lot of bureaucracy going on there, and they are super busy trying to figure out that compliance. You've done some really interesting benchmarking. I'm going to try and share this. It's all new to me, so bear with if I'm that one. Okay. So do you want to talk me through I mean, your benchmarking initiative has been, strong for a while. Do you want to talk me through, how these projects come about and what this one in particular is?
Sure. It's kind of an interesting, ironic situation, which is that we decided this year, wouldn't it be fun to do some live polling as part of our webinar series? And we decided that in January, we would do something on trends throughout the industry. And instead of just statically reporting out, that we would make it a live and interactive thing. So we did some polling. Actually, we did a variety of topics, and we saved for the end disruptors. So we covered disruptors such as mergers and acquisitions and things like that, and then we saved coronavirus for last. So think about it for a moment. We're talking about a webinar that happened in January, so people were just starting to get interested, and we did 3 separate webinars for the 3 regions, EMEA, America, and APAC. So when we did the APAC one, we said at the outset, we all know that coronavirus is on everyone's mind. So we promised we'll get to that, but we saved it for last. Because even then we knew that if we went down that rabbit hole, if you will, that we would never get out of it. So, but anyway, to make a long story short, one of our questions was about the coronavirus, and we created this infographic, which I think Dom's going to share after this podcast. And So bear in mind that these were the numbers several weeks ago, as of March 12th to be specific. And you can see that the numbers were very interesting. Like the pioneers were only 11%, those who came out in front and were really ready for pandemic. The early followers were the majority group. But again, the number of people interviewed or participating rather was only a little over 300. And then we had our later followers, 25%, and then the Lone Rangers are the ones who were just sort of not necessarily paying attention or just doing things on an ad hoc basis. Those numbers today, we're still tracking. By the way, those numbers are coming from Mercer survey, I should clarify, but we did our own as well, and they compared very well. Now our numbers are more in the range of almost every client doing something, either holding on and not doing any new initiations at all, or starting the process, you know, going through the motions and just being ready for takeoff if and when, you know, let's say when, not if,
Yeah.
the doors open again.
Yeah.
So happy to share more details on the benchmarking. You can see, right, as you scroll, there's 3 tabs here. We broke it down into, starting with the Americas, some of the actions that companies are taking. So again, these numbers are not the most current. We're looking at them every day, but still the numbers were pretty high on canceling business travel, even in the middle of March. 42%, I would have thought that number would have been higher actually on postponing new initiations. I think by now that number has increased, although I'm still surprised that we are still getting those initiations. And then we have repatriations. There were companies who were offering repatriation if it was feasible. Of course, now it's not even feasible. So it'll be interesting to see how those numbers change, again, when the doors open in different places. Moving on to EMEA, the numbers, you know, it follows a similar pattern.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, but if you now just even if you just go right over to APAC, you'll see it's much higher, and that's because at that point they were already in the thick of it.
Absolutely.
So it is interesting to see though how different countries are reacting, and I think we could have a whole other webcast on how culture influences this, right? and the ability to follow rules and the political systems and so on and so forth. But it is pretty interesting to see these numbers.
Thank you very much for sharing that. That really is fascinating. And I mean, you're right. Funnily enough, I have a call with one of our intercultural trainers, Sabine Burlocker, later today, because she is fascinated at the responses culturally from country to country. I mean, I also need to talk to our member in Sweden, one of our members in Sweden, because they have gone down, I don't know whether you know this, they've gone down the route of no restrictions. Well, groups of over 50, but the stores are open, restaurants are open, and I'm just fascinated by that culturally. Whether it's because it's a benchmark nation for freedom, I don't know. It's just fascinating. So
interesting that you bring up Sweden, because I have very good family friends who live in Sweden, and we've had a few FaceTimes, and actually this one particular family, they have decided on their own that they're doing the shelter in place because they feel that this is, you know, that the rest of the world, this is the way to flatten the curve, and they don't want to have any part of it. So what they told me anecdotally is that many people are
doing that anyway.
Are doing it anyway.
I would have thought so. That's really fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's a bit like, I don't know whether you know, but in the United Kingdom, initially, so beginning of March, we were also down that route of herd immunity, and then it switched immediately on the 14th, I think, into shelter in place or quarantine. That's really, really interesting. So can I ask you briefly, I mean, I've been asking this of everybody, what actions are you hearing about from the US government in terms of any financial packaging, financial aid, loan stimulus that's coming to alleviate the issue for individuals and for corporations.
Yeah, I think very similar to what Rob said. I saw Rob's interview is the U.S. Congress, and also Lynn. I just finished watching the interviews with Lynn Shotwell from work. But the U.S. Congress approving a $2.2 trillion economic stimulus package, a huge chunk of that going to individuals, but still waiting to hear time frames of when that's going to happen. But a lot is going to that. A huge chunk going to large corporations as well as small businesses and state and local governments and public services. So we'll see how that's, going to pan out. There's been a temporary suspension of student loans with no interest. That's another thing. And also unemployment benefits have been implemented, pretty much immediately with no waiting period like typically there is. So those are some of the things they're doing. And we keep hearing, press conferences on a daily basis on what's going on. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and how people can tap into that, and what they need to do to get the funding and the assistance that they need.
I mean, that's certainly what, the message that I'm getting from members. Again, it's so different and it's very cultural. Most European countries have gone straight. I mean, I think France immediately said, we're paying everybody. The government will pay everybody. The UK has implemented that, but how long that implementation is going to take, as you say, and what it's going to look like is a different thing. Germany is in a very similar situation, whereas it took Italy much longer, and Spain is still, it's just fascinating because, I mean, I don't know how you make those decisions as a politician. I mean, I said that to Rob, and he was like, "Yeah, well, it's difficult enough to make these decisions as an entrepreneur." So yeah, it's a good point. How are you all staying positive?
Well, I will tell you, I'll preface this by saying one of the things that's been kind of exciting is my colleague and friend Laura has started a Zoom yoga class that I've been taking for the last couple of weeks. So, we're all trying to do what we can. I think many of our team members within our group, at least, are trying to do weekly meetings via Skype and trying to stay positive and making sure that our teams also have what they need to stay positive as well. So senior leadership did put out some videos encouraging everybody to take breaks, exercise where you can, take care of yourself and your families, which is really nice to hear because we've been busier than ever. I mean, just with the virus and keeping up with it. So it's difficult when you're working from home and you're sitting at your computer all day long and you realize, geez, I haven't even gotten up to get something to eat. So you've got to make sure mentally that you're staying positive, making sure that, you're taking care of yourself and your families. So I'd love to hear what Laura has to say about how her yoga class is going, but it's been really nice.
That's great.
Well, the yoga class is great. It's so much fun for me. On the side, a few years back, I got certified to teach yoga, and I've kept up with it all these years teaching. I never really thought I was going to keep doing it, but I had enough local interests and friends who like to do it with me. So we have been doing this for a long time where we do it just totally on a donation basis. And every now and then we take the money and we donate it to a local cause. So we're still doing that. And there's a food bank in Westchester where some of people are coming to the live streaming virtual classes, making donations, which is really nice. And it's good for me too, because, it keeps me exercising and it keeps me seeing my friends, which is great because I do live alone. And otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily see these folks. And I'm a big outdoor person. So rain or shine, I'm out there. The challenge now is finding a place to walk where there aren't a lot of people.
Yes.
So I've been exploring the various woods areas around me, which is great. I'm not going to say where because then someone watching
What else will be there? Exactly.
But yeah, I think that's really important. I've been a person who worked from home for a while, so I have some of those rituals in place, but it is really important to get dressed. Even if it's a new pair of sweatpants, get out of bed and get refreshed and get dressed, shower and all that. And try to leave, you know, leave your space somehow, leave your space in the morning and leave your space in the afternoon so you can sort of re-enter your place and make that compartmentalization. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. Thank you. I agree 100% with all of it. And I must admit, the yoga thing is terrific. I have been meditating a lot. I've always meditated, but I've really started doing it properly at the moment.
Great.
I think the interesting thing in as well from what you're saying, but also from what other people are saying, is the connections and the communications that we're all, holding. I've never spoken so much on the phone, on WhatsApp, on, that sense of connection that we're sharing this bizarre experience together. And when it ends, we are going to really enjoy seeing each other for real.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Laura and Mary. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you both. And I'd love to, a month down the line, check in again and see where we are. That would be absolutely fantastic. But
Sure.
really, thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely to see you. I'm so sorry we won't see you in Seville. Keep up the Spanish. By 2021, you'll be fluent.
Muchas
I'm gonna
gracias.
try to.
Muchas
Thanks,
gracias.
Dom.
Bueno, take care. Lovely.
Stay well.
Thanks again. And you.
Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.